I've forgotten what I was gonna say. Have you guys planned your Halloween costume yet? Because usually I plan mine way in advance, and this year that did not happen. I've been way too busy with my finance channel and building some crazy props, and so it all just kind of accumulated into this moment of, oh my goodness, I have to build a mask, and I have to build it today. So this plaster is mostly dry. I had it in front of the fan, freeform Sculpt. Now this stuff is very, very similar to epoxy Sculpt, which some of you use. Basically it's an AB type plastic. I do have a bucket of water in case I want to do any smoothing. This stuff has a pot life of about an hour and a half. So there we go, there's two balls that are about the same size. And now I'm just gonna knead this together. I want to make sure this gets really well mixed because it won't cure if it's not mixed properly. It's starting to stick to my hands a little bit. So the idea with this is that I'm going to just put this on here, and this is going to be able to create a thin plastic layer for me to mold the leather over. Well, this is pretty exciting. All right, so this has been sitting overnight, and it is way more rigid than it was last night. It looks like it hasn't drooped too much to one side. I can still put it on. Whew. That epoxy Sculpt stinks a little bit though. That's a bit crazy. Let's take a look at that. I mean, how cool is that? Now, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim this off, and I'm gonna trim off the bottom nice and evenly, and then I'm gonna mount it to some plasticine or something so that I have like a really rigid form to push down on, because I'm gonna wanna wet the leather and just push it right down onto this. All right, so the first thing I wanna do here is I wanna just test my paper pattern, because I wanna get the leather soaking, and then I'm gonna trim this buck down. Now, if I put this paper pattern on here and kind of line it up with the nose and the eyes, I can totally see why they used to make this long nose shape, because look how easy it is for that flat piece of leather to fit almost exactly on this. We're just gonna push it down in the middle. So you can see I got a little bit wide on this one side, so I'm gonna have to trim that back. And I'm also noticing that with this Sculpt, I wanted to go a little bit higher on the brow. So I don't really know from the images how high those masks go, but I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna see if I can add a bit of leather to the top. And it looks about just over 3.5 inches. So if I lay my piece of paper out here, if I add 3.5 inches to that, you can see I'm just creating the top of this curve. And that's what I'm gonna cut out for my leather. And of course, I'm gonna trim it a little bit wide so I have some extra room to kind of pull it down. This is a double shoulder, so the spine is here, and I know that the further down I get off of the neck, the more flexible and pliable this leather is going to be. So the top part of the crown is going to be the part that I need to do the most shaping on. So I kind of want to keep that towards the underside of the cow, and I want this point to be up near the spine. So if we were doing it like here, then I would probably put the pattern here, and if I was on this side, I would put the pattern this way. In this case, this is probably the best place, so I'm just gonna grab a knife, and I want some extra. So I'm just gonna cut that chunk out. Now that piece is about right, but I'm a little bit long here, so I'm just gonna trim this off, and that's gonna go into my scrap bin to make eye patches and things like that. And then this is the piece that I'm gonna soak. Now, I always use really chunky leather, but you guys could use whatever you want. This is measuring right in between 5 and 6 ounce. Next thing to do is put this into really hot water. Now, this is about hot enough that I don't really want to keep my hands in it. So I just ran straight hot out of the tap. And what I want to do is get this leather working so that that water can get right down into the center. See how soft and pliable that is already. I'm gonna lay this out flat on the table for a moment and just let that water kind of soak in. Okay, so I don't know how this stuff is gonna cut, but I'm assuming I can cut it with tin snips. Yeah, just like I thought, super brittle. Trimming some of this back. It's actually a bit more brittle than I thought it was gonna be. This plastic has a shore hardness of 80 durometer, which is pretty rigid. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that it's cracking a bit. This was a bit of an experiment making a buck like this. I've got, varying thicknesses there of the plastic, and I think I might make it a little bit thicker in the future. I think I'm gonna grab a block of plasticine and just shove it on there. The other thing I wanna do is pierce through these eyes. I'm pretty confident that the eye is in the right spot. Otherwise I would have cut these out before I even put the plastic on. But let me just hack at it here. Well, here's the big test. Now I'm gonna try not to breathe this crap in. Yes, I can see, that's about right. Oh, there's something really sharp right there. That little guy is sharp. Let's trim that off there. Okay, so the real question is, does this look good on the side? Is this coming back far enough? That's the short side. And this is the long side, and I feel like the short side's probably pretty good. Oh, I got the dust in my eye. Ugh, fantastic. Okay, let me get this eye cut out, and then I'm gonna wet the leather over it. I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to do this, and I think it's just with an old school file. Now it's pretty thin here. Didn't really put a lot of plastic there. I want to make this eye hole pretty big because there's nothing worse than having an eye hole that's bugging your eye. That's starting to look pretty cool. I want to support this the best that I can because I'm worried if I push down on this plastic too hard, it's gonna break. So I just grabbed a chunk of modeling clay that I have sitting around that's really firm. And I've got some really soft clay that I like to use. Of course, I'm worried that I'm gonna get plaster all over my clay, which I like to reuse. So I'm just gonna put cellophane on the inside of this plaster again, because this plaster seems to be ridiculously messy. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the soft clay and I'm gonna put it on the inside of this mask. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. So now let's move on to that leather. And remembering the orientation of where my face is gonna be, I'm gonna start to squish this down on here. And the whole idea with any of these is we're stretching basically down over that form. First, I'm just gonna use my hands. So as I start to get in here, I wanna make these shapes a little more pronounced, and I wanna get in with my folder. I'm gonna start to rough out these shapes here. And because I've put that plasticine in there, I can kind of squish right down into those eye sockets. The whole idea with this is to get this squished down against the buck. And it does take a bit of work. The idea here is that we're using the base as a guide, but we're still sculpting it. We're not necessarily just matching to the base that's underneath. We can kind of smooth out these bumpy spots that are underneath that are a part of the sculpt. You can enhance things. I want this cheek line. See how the shape is starting to come through there. I want to kind of match to that other side. So similar to the plastic that I was sculpting last night, every mark is going to stay there. So I have to be very careful about what I put on, what I don't. It's interesting how the leather works. It's like the fibers start to relax a little bit, and so when you go back to the same spot that you were working on before, you can push it down even further. And you can just continue to get deeper and deeper. Now I'm just going to put it in front of my little heater with the air moving on it is going to kind of set it in place. Now I could just let this air dry if I wanted, but I want to speed up the process. Well, now that I have a moment, because those masks are drying, I thought I would talk to you about Venetian masks, because these ones in particular are styled off a very particular painting. Aren't those cool? Yeah, exactly. And that's why I wanted to do these masks in particular, because Venetian masquerades have a long history, and I wanted to encompass that when I got invited to a masquerade party. All right, so it's been about an hour and a half on this guy, and I whipped together a second one for my partner Karine, and I'm gonna make it a little tiny bit narrower for her. So I'm gonna take this buck away. If you guys are interested, I actually make these fabric weights. They're available on my Etsy store. These are the heaviest ones. They're the ones I use all the time. They're stainless steel, so you can put them right on this wet leather without worrying about them rusting at all, which is really nice. So there's no paint to chip off. I'll just show you what's going on the inside. It's dry, it's still wet where the fabric weights are sitting. I want to make a straight line from the edge of the mold down to the corner. I'm going to hold the ruler on here, and I'm going to draw a straight line on the leather, which of course is easier said than done. I'm just going to draw this line on here and come right over. Now this is one of those times where leather is way easier than working with steel, because you can kind of bend it around a little bit. And with my freshly stropped knife, I'm just going to make a cut right through that. And this is where having a sharp knife is absolutely imperative, because as you can see, once you get into this, you can just flow right along. And yes, I'm cutting towards myself, but I'm doing so with control. I have my fingers on the leather. I'm not pulling with very much force. I'm just slowly working my way towards the next cut. What I'm not doing is like free cutting like this. Now to mark this bottom nice and evenly, using a piece of wood, I'm lining this pencil up with the front, and with it just sitting there, I can just draw my trim line, and that makes it parallel to the table. Then I can continue along the other side. So even if your surface, your curve is all wonky there, which it could easily be in this case, because it's a fun leather mask, it gives me a nice straight line to cut. So there we go. Now we've got a nice trim bottom. The mask is looking pretty good. Now I just need to cut out these eyes and we'll get some paint on this. When I look back historically, you can actually see quite a bit of skin tone in these eye sockets, which means these eyes were pretty big. There. It's looking pretty good, I think. You know when you can't find quite the right tool, like the handle for your little blades? So I'm not really sure where it is, but I also know that these blades are extremely sharp, and I just stropped it. So there's absolutely no reason why I can't just use it. It's imperative that we keep our tools sharp, because it's safer to use a sharp tool because you're not fighting against the workpiece. And again, cutting towards myself, but with control. And there we go. Perfectly cut out eye. I'm trying to decide if this eye hole is big enough. I'm gonna put the attachment point for the tie right about here, just above my ears. That is going to be pretty good, and overall, it feels good. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it, so let's get this finished. If this knife starts giving you resistance at all, just grab your strop and just give it a couple of good swipes on the strop. You'd be surprised what a difference it makes. There we go, both eyes cut out. There's one last thing I want to do, and that's just give a number 2 edge bevel to this. Again, your beveler should be sharp. Now today I'm using Angelus brand white acrylic leather paint. If you guys are interested in some of these products, remember to check the description below because I have all of these products available through Amazon associate links. If you guys use those links down below, I get a little commission, which is amazing because it allows me the funding required to make more cool videos like this for you. Often people ask whether or not you can just use acrylic paint. Well, of course you can. You can just use regular acrylic paint. Now, I personally find that the coverage I get from this Angelus brand is a little bit better than straight out of the tube white paint. Now, because this is acrylic paint, I'm just gonna pop it back over here in front of the fan, leave it until that first coat is dry, and then I'll put a second coat on it. It's like film. This is what our whole life is like. We spend all this time setting up the lights so that the frame looks absolutely beautiful, and then we shoot an intro and it's just like, oh yeah, that was quick and dirty. This is the big reveal.
You should be walking the frame and then turn towards the camera.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Smoke machine? Come on, Richard, let's do the smoke machine. Check me out on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and remember to hit that like button down below because it helps the channel a ton. If you seriously love this video and you made a mask of your own, then please send me a picture on Facebook and leave a comment down below telling me how awesome this video was. You guys are great. We'll see you next time where you never know what we're gonna be building next.